Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. China will in all likelihood overtake the US this year to become the world's biggest vehicle market. The rise of the Asian country's automotive industry, barely 10 years old, has been stellar and there is still more to come. Senior contributing editor Irma Venter has just returned from China and shares her impressions with us. Irma, welcome to Second Take.
Thanks, Mariaan.
Just how big is the Chinese automotive market?
Well, this year we'll probably look at sales of about 11 million units, and that will only be passenger cars and light commercial vehicles. That will be the world's biggest market then from this year. The US used to be the world's biggest market at about 16 million units a year, but that was prior to the economic crisis. This year they're going to come in at around 10 million units, which means there's a whole new world order out there for the automotive market.
When you were in China, you visited the Photon and Cherry plants. What is your impression of the Chinese vehicles? I mean, they're often slated as being of poor quality.
Well, first off, let me say we were the guests. It was a group of South African journalists. We were the guests of AAD, which is a joint venture between McCarthy and Imperial, and they import Cherry and Photon brand into South Africa. Well, the first thing that you can kind of notice when you walk into the plants is that quality is definitely improving. When they first launched Chinese vehicles in South Africa a few years ago, you would get in and you would kind of step into a time warp. It would be as if you're in a Japanese vehicle of 20 years ago. And the quality was kind of a plasticky interior. The quality was not that good in terms of drivetrain, in terms of the panels maybe not fitting together quite so nicely. There's a massive jump in quality now. You could actually see that they really learned a few lessons. They really improved their product. You look at the new products and it's really of a much higher quality than it ever used to be before. So that's the one thing that you could kind of notice when you walk into the plants in terms of quality. You could also see that the capacity is just huge. The Cherry plant we visited had a capacity of 400,000 units a year. To put that in perspective, the whole South African vehicle market will be about 380,000 units, and we have 7 OEMs manufacturing in South Africa. So the capacity of China is absolutely big. And then you can also look at a few other things that they used to be accused of copying well-known brands. The Chinese vehicles was a mere copy of like an Audi or a Volkswagen or whatever. That's also changed now. They're talking about piracy. They're talking about intellectual property, of registering patents. So there's a whole new focus on developing a pure Chinese brand that is recognized as exactly that. So we saw some new developments roll off the line there that is really interesting, kind of original. And you could see that they're also planning on taking over the European and the US market, and they publicly state that. They say that they are gearing up to enter these markets and they want to enter in a big way. So they're looking at adhering to emission standards, they're looking at adhering to safety standards to allow them to enter these markets. So there's definitely a big assault on the way from the Chinese market, and they've definitely worked on quality for them to enable this. So things have changed.
How are the Chinese brands doing in South Africa?
Well, they're doing okay, but not so well. In terms of the South African vehicle market, we'll see a drop of about 30% in sales from last year. The Cherry brand, for example, sales have dropped by 50%. It seems like when times are tough that people return to familiar brands, they return to what they know. So the Chinese vehicle brands are suffering indeed. But as AAD MD Brett Soso says, there's still a valid argument for cost. The cost comparison that you can get from a Chinese vehicle, cost advantage that you can get from a Chinese vehicle. So definitely that is still on offer, and that will remain a valid offer, a valid reason for people to buy Chinese vehicles. So he's also very open when he says when he brings a vehicle into South Africa, it has to make price sense. In other words, it has to be value for money offer that he can offer to the South African consumer. And you will see that for example, they offer the QQ3, the J5, and the Tiggo to South African market at the moment, and that they're planning to expand this range because they believe there is a market for Chinese vehicles in South Africa. So what will be coming from them will be the new J1. That is a small hatchback 1.3 litre. It will compete with the likes of the Hyundai Getz. That will come later this year. That's in October. And in September we'll see a new Photon taxi coming to the market in Kunzi, Zulu for Bull. They've moved from the previous short wheelbase taxi that they had on offer to move to a longer wheelbase, so there's more legroom for passengers. And they also had to adhere to the new taxi recap specs, where there had to be an escape roof hatch being put into the taxi now, and this fully adheres to that now, the new Kunzi, and that is coming in September. There's a whole other range of Photon vehicles being planned for introduction in South Africa. You'll see there's a range of light trucks coming, 1.5 to 5 ton trucks. There's a multi-purpose vehicle, MPV, called the MPX coming to South Africa. That's all being homologated, running to be rolled out in South Africa through to 2010. So there's a lot of products still to come from Photon, because they believe this. Photon is also introducing a range of heavy-duty trucks into South Africa. That's the long-term plan, to kind of fill that gap that they say has been left by all the truck manufacturers moving into the premium segment, leaving the low end of the market kind of open.
Are there any plans for Chinese companies to set up a manufacturing plant in South Africa?
Yes, but there's a few problems there. Cherry and Photon, I spoke to both executives from both companies, and they said they are definitely interested. But now we have to consider that to qualify for government support from 2012, you need a manufacturing volume of 50,000 units a year. And Chinese vehicles are not anywhere close to this. So the problem is, will they get the volume to qualify for the support? And manufacturing in South Africa, you do need support, because you're very far away from all the markets. We're far away from Europe, we're far away from China, we're far away from North America, so you need government support. But Chinese vehicles' volume is not anywhere near 50,000. Then you also have to consider whether McCarthy and Imperial, they're both JSE-listed companies, are they interested in manufacturing, moving into manufacturing? They're vehicle distributors, they're not into manufacturing. But there's been sort of a door left open. Both Cherry and Photon can buy into AAD, so they have the option of buying into AAD. And if that happens, we may see things starting to change. It may mean that manufacturing is actually on the table.
Irma, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. That's the Second Take show for today. Thank you for watching, and join us again next week for more news analysis.